So the Rera was introduced to ensure that 70% of the monies collected from customers are actually used to complete that particular project itself. Single most important thing is ensuring that there is clear title to what you're purchasing, and tomorrow you won't get embroiled in any litigation. Read the agreement carefully, get professional advice if required.
I love that you've added if required, no pressure. Hello and welcome to Real Advice on Real Estate, a flagship podcast by Birla Estates. My name is Nikil, Taneja, and this is where we will get real about the ups, downs, what's, whys, and trends about real estate. Today's guest on the podcast is Bhoumick Vaidya. A distinguished expert and senior equity partner at Shardul Amarchand, Bhoumick has built a stellar reputation as a legal authority in real estate law. He has successfully navigated some of the largest and most complex real estate transactions, offering strategic and tactical guidance to ensure smooth and compliant deals in an ever-evolving legal landscape. He has also authored a section-wise commentary on Rera. Thank you so much for being here, Bhoumick. Bhoumick, there's so much I want to ask you, but how are you feeling about being part of this podcast?
Thanks, Nikil, for having me here. I'm excited and hoping to have a great conversation with you.
Yeah, I'm going to make a very bad joke to get it out of the way. We are raring to get going on Rera. So I'm sorry, I just had to do that. But very excited to have this conversation. There's so much complexity in some of these subjects, and I think you can offer some really valuable advice on the same. But before we get into some of the main conversation, I have a segment to ask you. It's a segment called The First Thing. I'll ask you a few questions that will help us get to know you just a little bit better. So very excited to ask you. The first one, what is your first memory of growing up in a home?
So I think the first memory that you have in a home is actually just running around in the house with your mother or father chasing you around the house. I think that's the first memory that I have of my home.
Which home was this? Could you tell us?
This was my childhood home. So I'm born and brought up in Mumbai. And it was where I was my first memory in my parents' home.
Yeah. Did you have was it like a fond time growing up in Mumbai at that time?
Yeah, it was a great time in Mumbai. Things were easier, simpler. We could just go out anytime. So I think there were simpler times.
Do you remember what would be your first memory of home that you in some way made you realize that homes are important?
So I actually purchased a home in 2023.
Okay.
So and before that I was actually staying at my parents' place. So when I purchased my own home, I think when I moved in, I think understanding how a house is made from the four walls to building the house, I think that's the process that I learned when I purchased the home.
I think they say something very lovely, right? It's not a home until you actually start staying in it. It's a house till then.
Yes.
So lovely. Do you remember the first time you saw a home that you fell in love with?
Yeah, so the one I actually purchased, that's the one that I sort of went. We had looked at a few places before, but I think that was the one I entered in, and within the first minute or so, I felt like, okay, this is what I want to buy, and this is where I want to live for at least a considerable amount of time of my life.
Where is this, and why was it so special?
So it's in Worli, Lower Parel area. It's just the view that I got from the house, the layout of the house. I think that's what really drew me to that house.
What is the view? I'm very curious now.
So I stay on the 65th floor.
Wow.
So it's a view with the sea at the background plus the buildings. So I generally prefer that, having some buildings and the sea, not just sea, so that even in the night you have the sort of night sky and the lights of Mumbai city that you can see.
I love that. That sounds so beautiful. You've already answered about the first home you bought, but I'd love to know, why did you buy it last year?
So it was a decision taken in the family that since we were growing as a family, I think, and also with my daughter who was sort of growing up, this was a place where there were amenities, there are swimming pools, there's a clubhouse, and there's a playground. Getting open spaces in Mumbai is a challenge. So when you get a place which has all of this, it's something that you generally go for.
Yeah, I mean, I keep hearing that. I think a lot of the reasons of buying your first home is to, build a family in that place. So, congratulations to you. The first time you felt that real estate law can be a career?
So, I think when I started law, I was lucky enough that when I started in a law firm in 2002 onwards, I got that chance to work in different aspects with different laws. I generally preferred the real estate law compared to the others, which generally people prefer litigation, arguing in courts, and the mergers, acquisitions, and the foreign funding. I generally preferred the real estate law.
But so why is that? What do you like so much about it?
So I found it as my calling, and if it makes any help, my name Bhoumick, it means king of the land. So that also worked. I think my parents knew I go down this field. So I think that's where I sort of headed.
So it was meant to be, basically. Yeah. Amazing. Do you remember the first time you felt proud of working in this sector?
I think in the last couple of years, the kind of recognition I've got in this field, I think once you reach a certain level of seniority, there's a lot more recognition that you get from clients. I think that started coming through in the last few years, where people come to you with their challenges and problems and look at you for solving them. I think that was one aspect. Second was when my book got released. So I had authored a book on Rera. So that got released and a lot of people appreciated it. I think those were the two instances when I felt that.
Could you tell the viewers what your book is called?
So it's a section-wise commentary on the Rera Act.
Amazing.
And it's sort of available in the public domain. It's one of the few books that are a section-wide commentary, so you can actually get details per section, what are the kind of interpretations that take place. I think in law, what a lawyer does is essentially interpreting what the law says and what it means for their clients. So that's something that is done in the book.
Correct. So I want to get into the main conversation, and this was a great segue. But I always start every podcast conversation by asking this question to our guests. Of course, the work that you do is very nuanced and complex. But how would you explain what you do to a 12-year-old?
So I'm a lawyer who specializes in real estate law. A real estate lawyer is one who, for his clients, drafts and negotiates the agreements for purchase and sale of real estate assets. A real estate asset can be land, can be a house, can be an office space or a warehouse. Besides this, we also investigate title. So that is understanding and figuring out who the owner of a particular property is. So if you're looking to buy property, you want to check that who are you buying it from, whether that person is actually the owner or not of the property. That's something, again, we can assist as a real estate lawyer.
Love that. I think you've got it down to, you've got it very straight down. Superb. I think I love that clarity of that answer, and it came with such confidence. Clearly, you're the right person to have written that book. So, I want to start by asking just as simple a question as, for those who don't know, and I'm sure a lot of people anyway know, but for those who don't, what is Rera and why was it important?
So the Rera is the Real Estate Regulation and Development Act. It came on 1st May 2017. It came into force. The central government got this act to ensure that there is regulation in the real estate sector with regard to under construction units. I think where there was constructed units where there is a building standing, the flat is there, someone can see it, you buy it, you pay the money and you get the flat. But for under construction units where the construction is still taking place, so today you're essentially buying a unit which is still to be constructed.
Correct.
The amenities that are still to be prepared. So in those cases, a regulation was required to ensure that the promises made to the consumers are fulfilled. So that's why the Rera Act was introduced, and through the Rera Act, the regulatory authority was put in place, which is the Rera Regulatory Authority, which is the one that looks after compliances with the Act.
What led to the formation of this Act? What was the landscape in the real estate sector that you feel like this was necessary to be introduced in 2017?
Yeah. So I think there were a couple of major concerns that were coming. One was to bring in financial discipline amongst developers. What was actually happening was that prior to the act coming in, if I had a piece of property as a developer, I would get customers who would pay me initial amounts against agreements for the units that I would be constructing on that property. Then instead of using those funds in that particular project to complete that project, they would actually go and use those funds to buy another property. And then in the second property, the investors and the consumers that would come to buy units there, their money would be used to buy a third property. So the developer would then create a large land bank, but then not have enough funds to complete the buildings. So the Rera was introduced to ensure that 70% of the monies collected from customers are actually used to complete that particular project itself, and cannot be used to purchase other land parcels or be used by the developer for any other purposes. That was one of the things that was brought in by Rera. Second thing was, even when there were disputes between the consumers and the developer, the courts were burdened. I think that's a sort of common knowledge for most people, that if you are going to court, the time taken for disputes is a substantially long period of time. Also, since most homes, at least in the metros, are crossing now 1 CR, so most of these matters go to High Court, which takes about 5 to 10 years to get an order. So they needed a mechanism by which there is an authority who can hear these matters quicker, and also in a manner which is not too expensive for people disputing. So I think when the matters were in courts, the cost that was incurred by a consumer to fight his case would go into lakhs. I think that's been brought down to thousands with the Rera Act.
So clearly this is a consumer-friendly initiative. But I'm wondering if you can give us a couple of instances of what were the issues that consumers faced prior to Rera that got solved by it?
Yeah, so I think consumers, so one challenge was construction was not being completed on time. There was no real pressure on the developer to complete construction on time. That's something that Rera has brought in. They put in penalties if there's a delay, that interest has to be paid to the customer if there's a delay. So that's something that was brought in by Rera. The second issue was that developers were changing the plans. So while your flat would remain the same, but your layout plans, you were promised a swimming pool, you were promised a garden, those were not being adhered to. And the dispute mechanism used to take so long that it actually would then not be viable for a customer to actually dispute it. So they didn't really have any other way of enforcing their rights, which is what Rera brought in and sort of safeguarded all these issues.
That's amazing. And I'm glad that it's happened. In fact, I Googled before coming here on the web about Rera to just see what is the most asked question that consumers have. And literally the most asked question was, how does Rera work? I feel like while we do understand that it is helpful to consumers, can you just break down what is the working of Rera? How does it help empower the customer as well as the sector?
Yeah. So I think one of the factors that Rera does is that before you launch a project and can sell anything to any customer, you have to register with Rera and provide all the relevant information about the project to Rera, which is then put up on the Rera website as a public domain information. So anyone who's looking to buy can access that information. So you'll have information with regard to what is the title and ownership of that particular project. Are there any encumbrances? Are there any litigations or disputes with regard to that land parcel in which I'm going to be buying a unit? Whether there is, what kind of sales have happened. So on a quarterly basis, a developer has to put up his details of what sales have been done. So now you can actually get that checked through the Rera public domain portal to check, what exactly are the sales taken place, what are the units available for sale. So those things have brought in transparency in the sector. That's one thing that Rera has brought in. The 70% I mentioned to you, that 70% of all monies recovered from customers on a project have to be used in that particular project itself. So that's brought in financial discipline in completion of projects. Besides that, there's also with regard to change of plans. And what used to happen is, if one developer couldn't complete a project, he used to bring in a second developer, the second brought in a third developer. That's also been restricted by the Rera Act. Now you need to take the consent of the consumers and clients who have bought units. Only then can you bring in new developers or change any of the plans.
Wow, this is, I mean, it's, you would imagine that things like this would actually not even happen to the extent that you're talking about. And I'm so glad that, there is now this discipline and it's a structured process. And ultimately everybody wins, because even the developers who are doing a great job are making sure that they get the reputation and the credibility that they deserve. And the consumers are ultimately always, winning in something like this. But as someone who has actually worked on this from a place of law, you've helped so many people, possibly in people who may have lost their life savings had this act not been there. Could you give us a couple of instances of a time when something like that actually happened, where Rera came in to help somebody who could have lost a huge chunk of their savings had it not been there to help them?
Yeah. So there was one instance where there was a customer who had purchased the unit. He was promised that, look, this is going to be a 70-story building. It's going to have all these amenities. Now, for whatever reason, that developer couldn't sell enough units, and there was a challenge with regard to their sales. So they unilaterally decided that we are going to bring it down to about 45 stories from 70 stories, which then increased the burden of the property taxes, the maintenance on the rest of the members. So in such a case, when the customer realized, he asked for an exit from the project and refund of his money. So that was something that the developer obviously refused, but he could get that order from Rera and get his money back. Wow. So that was one instance. Another one was, there was another instance in Goregaon where the developer, he had a sanction for 30 stories, but he sold up to 35th floor. So the flat buyers who were between 31st and 35th floor were like, the plans are itself not there. How are you going to construct a flat? And we don't want to realize after 4 years, which was the possession date, that you're not going to be constructing a floor. So they went to Rera and got themselves the exit because the developer didn't have approvals for their floors itself. So those are a couple of instances where this has happened.
Fantastic. I mean, again, it's so heartening to know that, there is a pro-customer, pro-consumer, act that can really help empower people who may get into, because buying a home is a very, very big decision and a huge financial burden. But I know that something like this actually also takes a lot of vigilance, even with the availability of Rera. So can you possibly give us one instance where a customer probably thought that Rera is there to help them, but were not vigilant enough and still ended up losing their money? Just so we know what to avoid.
Yeah. So I think it's important when the agreement comes to you as a customer to sign, you get it vetted, you get proper advice and sign that agreement. Don't just go on the basis of oral assurances. I think the one instance that sort of comes to my mind was, there was a show flat shown, mentioned about the whole flat being with Italian marble flooring.
Okay.
However, the agreement that was signed by the customer mentioned that there will be Italian marble and wooden flooring.
Oh.
So when he signed that agreement, he didn't read it. He had just seen the sort of show flat. And he signed the agreement. When the actual possession was given, it was only the living room that had marble and the rest of the house had wooden flooring. And at that point of time, the customer relations team just showed them the agreement. And a typical standard agreement of Rera would always mention that this overrides all previous understanding. And the agreement terms would be what would be binding between the parties. And that is what even Rera would look at.
Correct.
So it is important to see the agreement carefully. And not just the consideration amount and area, but also these other aspects.
So, I mean, I think the key thing over here is read your contracts. I feel like that's something that not enough people, it reminds me of us, just clicking on terms and conditions accepted. At the end of any of the apps that you subscribe to, you just agree to it without knowing what's inside. Maybe they're offering you wooden flooring instead of Italian marble.
Yeah.
No, this was so helpful. I'd also love to know from you, Bhoumick, Can you name some legal challenges that buyers face when investing in real estate, given how daunting it is as a task? And again, as I spoke about, there is a huge financial component to it. It's not very simple in that regard. So can you just simplify and tell us, here's the few legal challenges that any buyer really faces when they go into something like this?
So one issue that comes with real estate purchase is ascertaining the title, that when you're buying a particular property, are you buying it from the correct owner or not? I think that though that's generally the bigger concern in secondary market purchases, when you're buying ready units from individuals who already own the units. But with regard to when you're buying from a developer, I think the important thing is to be aware about the Rera Act and what rights you have under that Act, and therefore ensure that your agreement provides you with all those protections, what you are entering into with the developer. That's something to be taken care of. Second thing is with regard to the timelines. So there is a possession date that a developer is required to mention in the Rera agreement. That's something in line with what you are expecting to complete to get your flat within. Third thing is the layout. So today you should be comfortable when you are going to be purchasing a home, that you're going to be living there for a few years at least. So ensure that you are happy with what you're getting. So you're happy with the layout of the flat that you're purchasing and are happy with the location in which it's therein. So I think those are important criteria to be looked at. But I think the single most important thing is ensuring that there is clear title to what you're purchasing, and tomorrow you won't get embroiled in any litigation with what you purchased in real estate.
How does one recognize that? How does one make sure that is something that is set in stone?
So if you get legal advice, the lawyer would be able to ascertain this aspects. There's also two things that are required to be done as part of legal compliance to ensure that the ownership is clear. One is a search at the sub-registrar's office, which is in all jurisdictions in India it's provided, where registered documents are available for inspection, and you will be told what are the registered documents that have been executed for the particular property that you're searching for. So to ensure that there's no third-party rights that have been created on your property. There's also a public notice that is generally advised that you issue before purchasing a property to ensure that if there is anyone having any claims, he can come up and respond back and tell you that, look, I have these claims. Under Indian law, there is a concept of, if you are a good faith third party purchaser for valuable consideration, then anyone having any other prior document which is not registered with the sub-registrar's office would not have a right prevailing over yours. Now, to be a good faith third party purchaser, valuable consideration, you paid money for it, so valuable consideration is fine. But to be a good faith third party purchaser, you need to have done the sub-registrar search and not found any contrary documents, and issued a public notice in a regional and an English newspaper, and you should not have got any objections there. Once you have that, it protects you as a title owner from that particular property, any claims coming against that property.
I mean, so I love that you're making it sound so simple, Bhoumick, but it is quite complex, and it's also very daunting, as I spoke of. How does one actually go about improving their knowledge about the legalities of real estate? Because we weren't taught this. It's not like there is a 101 available somewhere, or the education system or schools and colleges teach you about these things. When you're buying your first home, there is obviously that financial stress that you're carrying, and then you have to ensure that you are diligent about all of these things. Now, of course, if you're working and hopefully with a reputed builder, everything becomes slightly more easier. But in general, what would you advise? We are hopefully doing this podcast as something that will give people that first information about real estate. But any other mediums that you would suggest?
So the one thing I would suggest is, now that Rera has come in and all the information is available, get accustomed to that website and understand how you can access information from that website. It's very useful information to be able to understand what can be obtained. And what information can be seen from that is relevant for you to decide which developer you want to go with, and the project that is looking to be most suitable for what your needs are. That's something that you can do. Besides that, there aren't really any courses as such. Then you'll have podcasts like this, and which I'm sure my other colleagues will also be doing in real estate law.
Sure.
So I think those are the only things that are there. There's no real course as such from a real estate perspective that you can do.
So let me, I wasn't talking about courses in any case, but like what you said, I find that very valuable when you say that, familiarize yourself with the Rera website. How does one, you said, and you'll also mention that you can figure out what's a developer you should go for. How does one recognize that this is somebody who is good, credible? Is there like just a mechanism to even understand that data that comes from Rera?
So I generally advise most of my clients who come to me that you are putting in so much of your life savings. Go with when you're buying under construction, go with a developer of repute who has a good financial backing, who can complete the project. Because there's no point getting a discount, but the developer never completes his project.
Correct.
So I think you should go with a developer and a project where there is substantial financial backing, and you know that there's a reputation that the developer has to be able to complete that project and has the financial viability and the wherewithal to be able to complete that project. And last would be, what are the other projects they've done in the past? Have they completed those projects? What was the customer feedback from those projects? I think that's something.
So Rera gives you all of that.
Yeah. So today, if there are cases in any particular project and what are the orders passed for or against that particular developer, all those are available on the website.
That's great. I think it's a great first step for anybody looking to buy property. That's fantastic. But let me also ask you, is Rera the same in every state, or is there like a different mechanism when you go to a website like this, or even outside of the website? Are there different rules that are applied in different states? And I'm asking, for example, like if I'm living in Mumbai today and I want to buy a home in, let's say, Chandigarh, how do I go about it? Is it simple? Is it more complicated if it's a different state and city?
So land otherwise is a state subject. So states are entitled to pass laws regarding it.
Correct.
To circumvent that, how Rera was introduced, that Rera was introduced by the central government, and it was said that the rules for it will be framed by each state separately.
Okay.
The Rera authority appointments happen by each state separately. So the rules are different in each state. So while you have the central act, so the 70% amount to be kept aside, there needs to be a registered agreement if you're paying more than 10% of the amounts. Those are common across pan India that needs to be complied with. But for Maharashtra, for example, has this unique thing on allotment letters. So they have a format that they've uploaded on the website saying that you need to comply with this type of allotment letter, and your allotment letter format needs to be having these information as a mandatory rule, which is not the case with some of the other states. So those are things that sort of vary from state to state. Again, what is construction? 70% of the amounts have to be used for that particular project for construction cost and land cost. What is construction cost and land cost? Again, in Maharashtra it's defined, but let's say in a Karnataka it's not defined. So it's left to interpretation. So those are sort of varying. NCR has their own set of rules. This is with regard to Rera.
Sure.
Even with regard to the completion. So in Maharashtra, when a building is completed, you get something known as an occupancy certificate, which means that the building is complete and you can go and occupy. In other states, it's called a completion certificate. The format's different. So in a third state, it can be called a building completion certificate.
Wow.
So the format and the approval that you get varies from state to state. Again, those are things to be looked at when you're purchasing. Suppose you're purchasing a ready unit. You have to be sure that, okay, everything's been completed, all checks have been done, and have I got this completion certificate, and what is the format in which it has to be in place?
So it may get confusing, but again, if you are able to go on the website and have familiarize yourself with the knowledge, it still gets easier.
Yeah. Second, lastly, the stamp duty and the taxes that you pay, those vary from state to state. So the stamp duty that you would pay in one state may be about 5 or 6%, in another state could be 7%, in some state it could be 3%. So those are different taxes being charged. That's the stamp duty, that's the amount of tax you pay on the agreement that you register.
Fair enough. Let me ask you, Bhoumick, so many people must be coming to you about buying property. what's the first chat that you personally have with anybody who's reaching out to Bhoumick in specific, that kind of helps them understand something very concrete about real estate that they would otherwise not know until you had that chat?
So my first advice would be, are you sure you want to buy this? And is this something that you have liked? Once you've liked and you're putting in so much of your resources, then it is about safeguards that need to be there in place. That what was promised to you, and ensure that what is in the agreement is what was promised to you. I think that's the critical aspect. So the area of the unit, the timeline for completion, the layout plan of your flat, that should be annexed to the agreement. That's something that I would say you always consider. Also consideration, that is now today reputed developers, in today's market we're seeing a lot of corporate developers who have come in with corporate backgrounds. They have sort of kept that discipline. But I think there are instances where developers have escalated costs. And have shown reasons that okay, these taxes have gone up, so now you need to pay more. So those kind of things are the safeguards that you should have when you're deciding, and which is why I said that go with a reputed developer who has a reputation that of completing projects and customers have been happy with them.
Why do you ask everyone if they still want to buy the flat? Do you see a lot of buyer's remorse later?
So it shouldn't be an impulsive decision. You're going to take this decision once or twice in life.
Correct.
So it's like a marriage. You decide that you're sure and then go ahead with it. So I think that's one thing and it shouldn't be peer pressure. I think that's one thing to look at.
Great, yeah.
That my friends are all buying, so I should buy. But it is a good time to buy in India. I think the real estate market has got much more disciplined from what it was. So from a buying perspective, it's a good time to buy.
So let me ask you this again as a last piece of real advice that you can give. To anybody who's actually feeling confident and excited about purchasing a home, what is something that can make anybody feel reassured about their decision when they are coming in? They want to buy the flat, but anything that you can say to them that will make them feel like, yeah, this is the right decision for me.
I think it's about selecting the right projects and the right developer. That if you selected the right project and right developer, it helps get your dreams of the home come true. I think that's the important aspect of it. Again, and it's about then having to wait through the period while the construction takes place. But I think selecting the right project that suits your needs and the right developer who will complete the project are the two factors that you should consider.
Believe in the marketing of only the reputed developers, not so much the rest. Yeah. Perfect. So, this was absolutely fantastic, Bhoumick. I've learned so much from this conversation. I already feel like, I don't know, for some reason I'm feeling mildly excited about exploring the Rera website now. Yeah. Like I want to see what lies within it. So thank you for actually making it seem not like too much of a difficult task and something that any consumer can possibly get their hands and feet around. Super.
So just one point in this. So Rera has made it mandatory that any advertisements done by any developer have to mention the Rera registration number of that particular project. And there's also in Maharashtra, they've also enforced a QR code. So you can actually scan that QR code, which will take you directly to the link. So even if the QR code is not there, with the registration number, you can search for the project. So in any marketing material of any developer, you will find that registration number.
Yeah. No, I can see why you are so excited about real estate law in Maharashtra, because this seems to be really consumer friendly. That's fantastic. Yeah. So our last segment is actually a fun one. It's called the 4-3-2-1 real advice. We're going to ask you four things, 3 things, 2 things, and 1 thing, and we're seeking your advice and guidance as an expert in this space. Let me ask you 4 tips that you will give a first-time homeowner. I know you've given a lot already, but if you had to consolidate it down to 4 specific things that you will tell a first-time owner.
Go for a house that you like. Go with a reputed developer. Read the agreement carefully. Get professional advice if required.
I love that you've added if required, no pressure. All right, okay.
We as lawyers aren't allowed to solicit, so I have to keep that.
Fair enough. 3 myths everyone has about the real estate sector that you want to break.
So one is that you'll get the same flat as the show flat being shown to you. Second is that recourse available to you can be got smoothly. I think it's still an effort. It still takes you about a year to get an order in Rera also. It used to take 5 to 10 years in courts, but it still takes 1 year.
Wow, okay.
And lastly is that what is shown in photos may not be real. So that's something to just be mindful of when you're actually purchasing.
Do people actually believe that show flats are going to be the same as their own?
I think a lot of people do that. Wow. They feel, so it's like a car, right? Like, so people look at it as, oh, I've gone and bought a car. So this was the car I saw and that's the same car that I'll get delivered. But a home is not the same. You know, if you're staying 5 floors above the show flat,
correct,
the view that you'll have could vary. Or you're 5 floors below, the view could vary with some buildings coming around. So that's, I think, the layout of where the kitchen is, the accessibility to your kitchen, to your bedroom, that can vary. So those are things to be mindful of.
So well said. So let me ask you 2 things you know about real estate that you believe not enough people do.
That when you're especially buying secondary market purchases, be careful of title of the property. Be careful who you're buying it from. Just because someone's living in that house doesn't mean that they are the owners of the house.
Wow.
That's something to be checked at all times before you purchase and pay substantial consideration for purchase. Second is, don't take advice only from a real estate agent. For legal matters, go to a lawyer.
For a while when you were pausing, I thought that you're thinking that should I reveal this secret? This is going to be a big one. But I especially really appreciate you you're explaining all of this in just really easy to understand terms, because a lot of us do make those mistakes until someone actually tells us better. And finally, one real advice someone gave you about real estate that you've not been able to forget.
So I was told, are you sure you want to buy this house?
Did that happen with the house that you bought, or did that happen with the house that you eventually did not
No,
buy?
the one that I bought.
Okay, so you were sure then.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on the house, and thank you so much for your time, Bhoumick. This has been such an enlightening session about Rera. Again, as I said, I mean, I'm going to repeat my joke. I'm raring to go to the website now to learn more. But I think I've really taken away the fact that it's so important to have reputed builders, reputed developers, and making sure that you do your due diligence. You know, Rera can help you, but you also have to put in your effort, and you have to put in your time to ensure that you are not signing anything that Rera cannot eventually help you with. So thank you so much for simplifying this. It was such a pleasure having you on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. And that's a wrap on today's episode, and once again an amazing conversation about real estate topics that we don't hear enough about. If you're hungry for more, we've got you covered. Head over to billaestates.com/realadvice. It's packed with everything you need to know about real estate. Blogs, a chatbot to answer your burning questions, and so much more. Keep an ear out for our upcoming podcast too. We've got some exciting episodes in the pipeline.